What if I told you that one man sparked a global movement, inspiring millions to reclaim their heritage and forever change the course of Black history? Today, we're diving into the life and legacy of Marcus Garvey, the visionary leader who dreamed of a united Africa and Black empowerment worldwide. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with others so we can continue spreading these important stories. Now, let's get into the top 10 facts you need to know about Marcus Garvey. We guarantee you'll learn something new today. 10. Survival of the fittest. Marcus Garvey took on one of the most daunting challenges of modern times: unify Black people. The chances of getting hundreds of millions on one accord were very slim. But did you know he probably had better odds of uniting millions than not dying before adulthood? Marcus Mosiah Garvey Jr. was born August 17, 1887 in St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica. His parents were Marcus Mosiah Garvey Sr., a stonemason, and Sarah Jane Richards, a domestic worker. The Garveys were a huge family. In total, there were 11 children. However, tragedy struck the Garveys often. Out of the 11 Garvey children, only 2, Marcus Jr. and his older sister, Indiana Garvey, lived to adulthood. Even though the details are scarce, only 10% of the Garvey children got to grow up. This could possibly explain the urgency and determination of Marcus Garvey Jr. during the fight for the liberation of his people. 9. The largest organization of Black people. Marcus Garvey was known for a lot of things, but the UNIA might be the most popular. But did you know the organization didn't form in America? The Universal Negro Improvement Association was founded in Kingston, Jamaica on July 20, 1914. While traveling through Central and South America and later to Europe, Marcus Garvey became increasingly aware of the global oppression and disenfranchisement faced by Black people. These observations inspired him to form an organization dedicated to improving the conditions of Black people worldwide. Garvey was particularly inspired by Booker T. Washington, who was a vocal advocate for Black self-reliance. Washington believed that Blacks should pursue education, economic independence, and self-help. The UNIA was designed to foster Black economic independence, cultural pride, self-reliance, and political autonomy. The organization promoted the idea of building institutions, businesses, and systems controlled by Black people. The ultimate goal was the eventual return of Black people to Africa, where they could build an independent and powerful nation free from colonial rule. Marcus Garvey would return to America in 1916 and launch a UNIA chapter in New York. By the end of the year, the organization had over 200 million members throughout the U.S. By 1920, the UNIA had 1,100 chapters in 40 countries, including the United Kingdom, Cuba, Panama, Costa Rica, and Ghana. By 1926, the membership of the UNIA had grown to over 11 million members, making the Universal Negro Improvement Association the largest mobilization of Black people in history. 8. Understood the power of media. Marcus Garvey was a charismatic and powerful storyteller. He understood the power of narratives and controlling those narratives. And at the time, the most effective way of storytelling was through newspapers. While still in Jamaica, Garvey tried his hand at launching his own publication. In 1910, he launched The Watchman, a magazine that only lasted 3 publications. Then, in 1912, he moved to England, where he took a job working at the offices of the African Times and Orient Review Journal. The African Times and Orient Review was the first political journal produced by and for Black people ever published in Britain, and it was led by the famous Black nationalist and journalist Deuce Muhammad Ali. Garvey was able to see firsthand the effect of Black people getting their news from Black people. After successfully launching the UNIA, Marcus Garvey created the Negro World. The Negro World was not just a newspaper. It was a platform Garvey would use to promote his vision of Black nationalism and communicate his ideas of racial pride and Black unification. The weekly publication quickly grew into a worldwide phenomenon, at its peak, bolstering a circulation of 200,000. The Negro World featured reports from UNIA chapters, poetry, literary excerpts, a woman's page, and a commentary on global events significant to Black people. It had sections in Spanish and French. Colonial authorities feared the Negro World, and it was banned in many countries such as Belize, Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica, and several African countries. Some countries even tried to ban the publication, but it became so important to those who believed in Garvey's ideals that Negro world would be smuggled into those countries and secretly distributed. 7. The Declaration of Black Independence. Any movement of liberation needs a foundational document. For example, as the Founding Fathers sought to liberate themselves from the British, they created the Declaration of Independence. So it would only make sense that in order to liberate themselves, Black people needed to adopt the same method. And thus, the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World was founded. The document was founded on August 13, 1920, at the UNIA's First International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World in New York City. The Declaration was created at a time when people of African descent were facing severe oppression, racism, and colonial dominion across the globe. In the United States, African Americans were enduring segregation, disenfranchisement, and violence under the Jim Crow laws. In Africa, most countries were still under European colonial rule. Caribbean nations were likewise struggling under colonialism and economic exploitation. The Declaration was a response to these injustices and a call for self-determination, and would become a cornerstone for Garvey's vision of Pan-Africanism. The founding document consisted of 54 articles and made such demands such as equality and human rights, and also rules for governing within Black people. This included be proud of your own race and never covet another's. Black people must educate themselves, and the total condensation of the N-word. The Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World will go on to inspire many, including Malcolm X. 6. Separation versus integration. Since the emancipation of Black Americans through the Civil Rights Movement, and even till present day, a question that has been asked is, are Black people better off integrating or staying separated from the mainstream? Marcus Garvey believed in separation for Black folk in the form of Black nationalism, self-determination, and self-reliance. This stance stood in contrast to many other Black leaders who believed integration was the key to salvation and true harmony. One of his biggest detractors was W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois believed Garvey's rhetoric was harmful and dangerous, especially Garvey's criticism of mulatto leadership and his belief in the purity of the Black race. Garvey's stance was so strong that his beliefs of Black purity and Blacks Back to Africa campaigns intersected with the terrorist organization, the Ku Klux Klan. This led to Garvey meeting with KKK's Grand Wizard, Edward Young Clark, in 1922. Garvey's rationale was that KKK believed in separatism, and to avoid conflict and to further the agenda of the UNIA, he believed he should sit down with anyone who could help, including his enemies. W.E.B. Du Bois didn't find that practical at all. He found it downright unforgivable. Du Bois was an integrationist who did not support a separate Black state and repatriation. Du Bois, along with other NAACP members, organized the Garvey Must Go campaign and colluded with the U.S. government to have him deported. Historians are torn on how to interpret Garvey's decision to meet with the KKK. For sure, it highlights the challenges he faced in trying to realize Black self-independence. 5. Black Starline. Other than the UNIA, one of Marcus Garvey's most historical notes is his launching of the Black Star Line. In 1919, Garvey founded the Black Star Line, a shipping company intended to facilitate trade and transportation between Africa and the African diaspora. The Black Star Line symbolized the tangible manifestation of his dream to connect people of African descent worldwide and promote economic cooperation. The Black Star Line began operations with the purchase of its first ship, the SS Yarmouth, later renamed the SS Frederick Douglass. The ship was intended to serve as a symbol of Black pride and capability. It featured the first Black captain and first all-Black deck crew. At its peak, the Black Star Line owned 3 ships, SS Frederick Douglass, SS Shadyside, and the SS Antonio Maceo. Despite the high hopes and enthusiasm surrounding the Black Star Line, the venture faced significant obstacles from the outset. From the outset, the ships were old and often in poor condition, leading to frequent breakdowns and costly repairs. Because of the audacious venture, an idea for a shipping vessel was great, but that was not a field of expertise. The UNIA lacked maritime expertise within the organization, leading to inefficiencies and financial losses. The Black Star Line also faced opposition with sabotage from both external and internal sources. White business interests and rival Black leaders viewed Garvey's project as a threat and worked to undermine it. Ultimately, the Black Star Line struggled to stay afloat and was dissolved in 1922. 4. Garvey the Businessman. The Black Star Line was just one of many business ventures of the Pan-African leader. Garvey believed in economic independence and sought to establish it through controlling various industries to serve his people. Marcus Garvey's economic endeavors was the African Communities League, founded in 1918. The ACL was the business arm of the UNIA and focused on developing commercial enterprises that could support the organization's broader mission. The ACL aimed to promote Black-owned businesses and encourage investment within the African diaspora. In 1919, Garvey established the Negro Factories Corporation, through which he would launch a vertically integrated initiative. Garvey wanted to create the products, manufacture the products, then sell the products, and on every level, employing Black people. He wanted to produce everything that a nation needed so that African Americans could completely rely on their own efforts. The NFC generated income and provided jobs by its numerous enterprises, including a chain of grocery stores and restaurants, steam laundry, tailor shop, dressmaking shop, clothing stores, publishing house, and doll factory. He also sold off stock for the NFC, so non-workers could also benefit from the corporation. In New York City alone, Garvey owned several buildings, owned a fleet of trucks, and had over 1,000 Black people working in his businesses. Marcus Garvey believed that economic empowerment was intrinsically linked to education. To this end, he led the establishment of schools and educational programs designed to teach Black children and adults the skills necessary for economic independence. These institutions emphasized vocational training, business skills, and cultural pride, aiming to equip the Black community with the tools needed to thrive economically and socially. 3. Garvey versus COINTELPRO. One thing that American history has told us over and over again: any leader whose aim is the liberation of Black people automatically becomes an enemy of the status quo. Marcus Garvey would be the first of many who would get caught in the crosshairs of the infamous FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover. The clash between Garvey and Hoover was a defining moment in Garvey's life and would establish the battlegrounds for Black leaders versus the U.S. government. Garvey first popped up on Hoover's radar in 1919, after Hoover became concerned about Garvey's growing influence and ability to mobilize mass amounts of Black people. However, Hoover would later recognize figures like Marcus Garvey as Black messiahs. Hoover referred to Garvey as a notorious Negro agitator, and his concerns heightened as Garvey gained momentum to realize his dream of Black self-reliance in the form of the Black Starline. The thought of Garvey leading an independent power structure that was devoid of white control infuriated Hoover. Hoover's plan was to neutralize Garvey's influence. His tactics included monitor, infiltrate, cause dissension, and eventually topple Marcus Garvey and his movement. This tactic would later be implemented on several other Black messiahs as part of the FBI's COINTELPRO program. Under Hoover's leadership, undercover agents were able to infiltrate Garvey's inner circle, leading him to be charged and accused of mail fraud related to the promotion of stock sales for the Black Starline. Garvey maintained his innocence and correctly argued that the charges were politically motivated, intended to destroy him and his movement because of his race and his advocacy for Black empowerment. Despite his defense, in 1923, Garvey was convicted of mail fraud and sentenced to 5 years in prison. After serving 2 years, he was deported to Jamaica. This would mark the first use of a Black FBI agent, James Worley, and the first time J. Edgar Hoover successfully disrupted a Black liberation movement. 2. He died. Twice. After his imprisonment and eventual deportation, Marcus Garvey remained committed to the cause of Black nationalism and liberation, though his impact was diminished once he left the U.S. Over the next 2 decades, he tried to rebuild. Garvey started with re-establishing the base of the UNIA in Jamaica. Even though there were Garveyites all over the world, he was never able to gather back the influence the UNIA once had. This was followed by a push into politics. Garvey established the People's Political Party in 1929, Jamaica's first modern political party. The PPP was formed to represent the interests of the Black majority in Jamaica and called for reforms such as improved working conditions and wages for laborers, universal education, social services, including medical care and assistance for the poor. Though Garvey's ideas resonated with many Jamaicans, his political career in Jamaica was not particularly successful. He ran for a seat in the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, but was defeated in the election. In 1930, he won a seat on the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, the city council, but his political influence was limited. He continued to try to control the media and founded several publications, including The Black Man, The New Jamaican, and The New World, through which he promoted his views on Black empowerment, anti-colonialism, and self-reliance. These publications helped him to maintain some influence and spread his message. though they were less widely read than his earlier publications in the United States, such as The Negro World. Garvey suffered a stroke in January of 1940 that left him partially paralyzed. Then, according to reports, he died in May of the same year. Except, he didn't die. Marcus Garvey's belief that you must control the media's narrative proved true. He was so furious by this false report that just a few days later, he actually died from a heart attack on June 10, 1940. 1. Never made it to the motherland. There was a lot of tragic irony in the life of Marcus Garvey, a leader and advocate for the betterment of black people, to be undermined by the FBI's first black agent, James Worley, and the NAACP, to understand the importance of controlling media, only for a heart attack to be triggered by a false media report. But maybe the biggest is a Pan-Africanist who believed that all black people across the globe should be connected to Africa, but he himself had never been to the motherland. That's right, Garvey never stepped foot in Africa. His motto of "Blacks to Africa" and his belief in one people united through African lineage never led him to making a trip back home. There were several reasons why the great leader never made his pilgrimage. After his arrest and deportation, it put heavy restrictions on his ability to travel abroad. Defending his case and losing the investments into the infrastructure of the UNIA left him low on financial resources. Also, during his lifetime, Africa was largely under European colonial rule. This made it difficult to establish a physical presence or initiate the kind of mass migration he envisioned. European powers did not take kind to his message of a black superpower. Even though he never stepped foot on the continent, his impact was felt. Garvey's influence was profound in shaping African liberation movements. His speeches and writings inspired leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, who became the first president of Ghana. Kenyan leader Jomo Kenyatta led his country to independence because of Garvey's vision of black empowerment and resistance to colonialism. Through his speeches, writings, and leadership of the UNIA, Garvey laid the intellectual groundwork for the Pan-African movement and the eventual independence of African nations, even though he never set foot on African soil.